Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Judy Morgan, and today's episode is going to be a lot of fun because one of my best friends in the pet food world, Susan Pixton, is joining me today. If you don't know who Susan is, what rock have you been hiding under? But I'll just give you a little intro. In 1991, Susan Pixton made her first phone call to a pet food company after her veterinarian informed her that her beloved dog's bone cancer at the young age of 8 was probably caused by chemical preservatives in her pet's food. Anyone remember ethoxyquin? The pet food company proudly told her, and I have used this quote, that the shelf life of their food was 25 years, more than 3 times longer than her dog lived. From that day forward, Susan has studied pet foods, pet food ingredients, and the regulations that govern them. In 2006, Susan started truthaboutpetfood.com. If you have never gone to that website, I strongly recommend that you go there and sign up for the newsletter because she keeps us up to date on what is going on in the pet food industry, the good, the bad, mostly the ugly. I don't know where she gets all this information, but she just goes down rabbit holes and finds information that none of us would ever be able to find. She also has the list, which you should sign up for, which is a list of trusted pet brands. It is an exclusive list to Susan, and it's curated by pet food safety advocate and founder for the Association of Truth in Pet Food, Susan Pixton. The brands use only high quality human grade ingredients that she would trust to give her own pet. In order to make the annual list, companies are first independently nominated, then vigorously vetted, and brands must source ingredients and manufacture exclusively in the US. As a pet food consumer advocate, Susan is a veritable expert in pet food safety and regulations. Seriously, anytime I have a question, this is who I call. So, Susan, welcome. Anytime you and I talk, we go down rabbit holes, we get in trouble, we usually laugh.
Do.
So, what I want to talk to Susan about today is pest control in pet food manufacturing plants. As you might imagine, anytime you have a lot of grains, dried ingredients, powdered products, you're probably going to attract pests, rodents, bugs, all kinds of things that, ooh. And by the way, some of these pet food plants actually have holes in their roofs, so there's bird droppings coming in, just, and birds flying around, just little extra special in there, although I don't think they fumigate for the birds as much as everything else. But as you can imagine, especially some of the really old plants that are scattered around this country, I've seen some outside of Denver, Colorado. They're in Missouri. They're in Iowa, Illinois, Ohio. Actually, there's some here in North Carolina. But some of these plants are really old and kind of in disrepair. How bad is the pest population, both bug and rodent?
Well, we have a Freedom of Information Act request that I got from FDA to evidence that. First, let's back up and remember that these products are not food and they are not abiding by food safety regulations. They're feed. Whole different ballgame. The following year, the FDA went back, did an inspection, and I obtained the FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act request for that follow-up inspection, which said, quote, the FDA found millions of roaches in the food production area. Millions of roaches. They had a copy of an employee pest log that an employee said millions of roaches, lots of roaches, all these different days. So FDA documented all of this and told them, shook their finger. You had a lot of roaches in the plant. It was kind of a filthy plant, but they did nothing. There was no warning letter. There was no recall issued. Absolutely nothing, because it's feed. That's the difference. These plants, feed manufacturing, whether it is for livestock or for cat and dog labeled as food, these plants, their ingredients are not in big warehouse refrigerators, walk-in refrigerators that are kept perfectly clean. Kibble foods most use dry, 100% dry ingredients, except for the fat. Their meat ingredients, a meat meal, is stored in a big bin. It's in like a big silo.
Right.
Their grains are in a big silo. These are all outside, and then they're brought in. The manufacturing process itself is just a dirty process. And they are not required to make it undirty. They're not required, like human food, to keep things clean. It's just not part of feed production.
Well, maybe they're trying to be eco-friendly and go with using insect protein as part of the pet food. Maybe we're just going to start incorporating roaches into the pet food. Right up there with crickets and mealworms and all these.
But
these
it's
other
not
things.
declared on the label.
That is true. It is not.
It's not declared on the label. I've had a truck driver who delivered ingredients to a pet food. Now, this is going to be very disgusting. Warning, graphic content. You can look and see how these dump trailers, there's a grate, and it's not like a flour where you sift through. It's poles like this big around going across, and they're 3 or 4 inches apart. So the dump truck of grain or meat and bone meal, whatever, raises up, dumps it all over this grate, and then it through conveyors, it gets distributed to that silo. They have had shipments of grain, this they told me was grain, that were loaded with dead rats, so many dead rats, because of our topic, the grain shipment was fumigated, the rats were all dead, but so many dead rats that it clogged the grate that they were dumping. So they had to stop the truck from unloading, pick all of these dead rats up off the grate. Then they put a screen over top of it to catch the dead rats and then sent it off. So ingredients are dirty. In feed grade pet food, unlike human food, grain comes...
So we need to also add rats on the ingredient list of, rat meat.
Yeah. I've always wanted to do DNA analysis of a pet food and check for flies and rats
and mice
and yeah, because they're in there, guaranteed. Yeah.
So interestingly, oh my gosh, probably 20 years ago, I used to eat a bowl of Frosted Flakes every morning for breakfast. I know, really bad for me, lots of sugar, just really horrible. I wondered why I always felt like poo. So anyway, at some point, it's probably after I met you and I started actually researching, where food comes from and what goes in it. And I read something on a human food side that actually listed the number of bug parts that are allowed per 100 grams of cereal, my Frosted Flakes or whatever box cereal that you buy or your bag of granola. The USDA actually lists how many bug parts are allowed to be in that cereal. And that was the last time I ever ate dried cereal for breakfast. It's just like, OMG. And now when I buy flour, I put my bags of flour in the freezer for at least 10 days before I will put them in my pantry, just in case there's anything in there. I want to kill it off. It's kind of scary. Like we all just assume that our food supply is all perfect. So we want to talk about, it's amazing what's going in our mouths that we don't know about. So we want to talk about fumigants because clearly, these pet food plants don't want thousands of mice and rats coming in their truckloads of corn or wheat or soy or peas or whatever they're bringing in. And they also don't want a bunch of bugs. So they are fumigated before they get to the plant when they're in either the train car or the truck container, correct?
Yeah, they're in transit. The rail cars are allowed to be fumigated in transit. A grain trailer, truck and trailer, is not allowed to be fumigated in transit, but they do it all the time. To anyone, I've told this to I don't know how many people, if you're going down the road and there is a grain trailer, look them up to recognize they're like a big, mostly stainless steel trailer, and they have these little chutes underneath of them. If you see that on the highway, don't get behind it, because I've talked to too many truck drivers who deliver to pet food companies, and they have to fumigate it because maybe the pet food manufacturer will not pay for it or not accept it if they visually inspect and see lots of bugs crawling around on it. So it's required to be fumigated, and they don't wait long enough. Fumigation, depending on the air temperature, can take, I think the lowest amount is 3 days. Well, these pet food companies keep the process going. We don't want to shut down the line. We've got to keep ingredients in here. And if they have to fumigate it in transit, they do. These drivers will untarp, like if properly fumigated, that grain would have a tarp, and that trailer would have a tarp over top of it to keep the gas. This is deadly, deadly toxic stuff, to keep the gas in the grain to kill these rats, bugs, in there. They'll remove the tarp so it's off-gassing while it's going down the road, but the car right behind them could literally be breathing this stuff in. I could see, your air conditioner's on, you're not paying any attention, you smell something a little funny, and then you run off the road and have an accident because you just passed out from breathing in this toxic substance. And we do know from FOIA documents that pet food manufacturers use this stuff. They bring the ingredients into the plant. At least one did. They bring the ingredients into the plant while they're still under fumigation, and it's poisoning the employees as well.
So that brings us to a lawsuit, which 2013?
2013, yes.
Yeah. So it was brought by a group of employees that worked for Mars who were breathing in deadly phosphine gas, which is the deadly gas produced by aluminum phosphide, zinc phosphide. I think there's also magnesium phosphide, which is pellets or strips or powders that are put in the grain trucks and train cars. And with the right temperature and humidity, that dissolves and releases the phosphine gas, which is what kills the bugs and the rodents. Reading the transcript, interviewing the pesticide applicator who was supposed to clear the cars, train cars, and clear the trucks, he had no training. He was not wearing a respirator. He was not given protective equipment. He was not given any test equipment to test whether the cars were actually cleared before the product went inside bins to go into it's a pit, before it went into the pit to then go into, and they had people actually working in the pit area with this grain off-gassing, and it was a huge lawsuit. And unfortunately, the people involved in that lawsuit are either sick or dead still. I mean, still sick or dead, because this is something that just ruins your health. It ruins your body. It affects almost all body systems. The really interesting thing, going down this rabbit hole over the past few months, I now know more about phosphine gas than I ever thought I would. What I discovered is it's used on all of these dried products, and
you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It's used in human food products as well. So I went running into my pantry after I read all this and pulled 2 things of rice off my pantry shelf, and they were not organic. And so I emailed both companies and I said, hey, what fumigant do you use on your dry grain products before they're packaged and shipped out to consumers? One never answered me, and the other said, we use what is accepted as safe by the USDA. And I went, well, that answered that right there, because you wouldn't tell me what you were using. So went in the trash. What I discovered is that this is worldwide use. And if you buy organic foods, they are not allowed to use these products. Organic foods kill any bugs and rodents by freezing or infusing carbon dioxide. So there's no oxygen for them to breathe, so they die. Well, I'd much rather have grains and food going in my mouth that's been subjected to freezing or carbon dioxide than have something that's got this chemical that may or may not have been off-gassed correctly, may or may not be still in there. To me, it's really scary. So then I went, okay, well then any dried ingredients that are going into, which I don't feed my pets, I don't know if I feed them anything with dried ingredients in it, but if I did, I would want it to be organic.
Yeah, there are strict rules. These type of fumigants have strict rules, state laws surrounding them, to where only an licensed pesticide person who's passed classes, received training, can use them, and only certain, you can't go buy these chemicals. There's very strict legal.
Well, you can't in this country.
Yes, in the U.S., but other countries.
You can buy them in other
Yes,
countries.
yeah.
Widely available. And in other countries, people will eat this stuff to commit suicide, which is why we know how it affects the body, because people will purposely eat this stuff. In doing all this research, I found 2 little girls in Idaho, I think, maybe 6 or 8 years ago, a pesticide applicator. This is also thrown down burrows, rodent holes, as a pesticide to kill rodents in your yard or farm, whatever. This pesticide applicator put it in the yard of this family without telling them there could be any issues with it or anything. What happens is when this is exposed to moisture, high heat, humidity, that's when it off gases. It was put in the yard. It rained. After it stopped raining, the little girls went out in the yard to play and died from inhaling the phosphine gas that was being released, just playing in their yard. This is serious stuff.
Deadly.
This is something, if you want to die, go get this stuff. You won't be able to get it in this country. Although we know from that lawsuit and that transcript interview, while the pesticide applicators are supposed to be highly trained, that one clearly was.
Well, no one oversees them, Judy. That's the thing. When these employees came to me, and I spoke with many different employees from that plant, when they came to me with their concerns, we then had a phone call with the director of surveillance and compliance at FDA. It was Dr. Dan McChesney at the time. And I put these 2 people on the phone with Dr. McChesney, do regulatory, go in, and like companies are required to keep logs when the rail car was cleared, when the trailer of grain or meat and bone meal was cleared by a licensed pesticide person. If they use fumigants in the plant, and I am told they do, they are legally required to file a notice with the local fire department, because this stuff is also explosive. It's combustible. I've filed FOIAs around pet food plants with fire departments. And strangely enough, I've never found that any company has notified the fire department that we're going to do some fumigation in the plant. This is me and my bad attitude talking, but it indicates to me that these companies are not telling anybody they're fumigating in the plant, which tells me that their employees are at risk. Of that one plant, there were 120 people who worked down in the plant. The plant shut down in 2013. Since 2013, I think 13 of the 120 people, 13 to my knowledge, have died. Most all of those 13 were in their 40s and 50s. And it's because of what they were exposed to. And much of it, there is a National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health document that anybody can look up. If you just do the acronym NIOSH, NIOS, pet food plant manufacturing, you can find that document, read it. I encourage everybody to read that document, because this government agency went in. It's been the only government agency, to my knowledge, that has even lifted a finger to investigate. They were going back to do lung testing on the employees. And it just so happened that Mars determined that there's more small dogs. This was their story. There was more small dogs now, and they didn't need this plant, and they shut it down.
Before NIOSH could go back in and do their. Exactly.
Before NIOS could go back in and do. And employees have told me, many of them did not sign this agreement, and they are who told me, Mars offered a 6-month severance package to each employee, which, in rural Midwest United States, there's not a lot of jobs. Working for a pet food company does pay better than a lot of jobs in the area. So they offered him a 6-month severance package in exchange for their signature on a document that no future health claims could be brought against Mars Pet Care.
Unbelievable.
And there could be more, but to my knowledge, 13 of those people are now dead.
There's probably more that we don't know about. Some of these companies have hundreds of plants around the world. I want to talk about how this affects the human body that we know of, because there are people that eat this and ingest this, inhale this, whatever, and die. So absorption through the skin is rare. Most exposure and injury occurs from inhalation. However, when this product, aluminum phosphide, so let's just say that you got a bag of corn and it still had aluminum phosphide pellets or powder in it that had not off-gassed yet. When you eat it, it reacts with the hydrochloric acid in the stomach, and poof, you have a big burst of phosphine gas. That is a lot of how this toxicity occurs. It releases gas in the presence of hydrochloric acid in the stomach, which is rapidly absorbed throughout the gastrointestinal tract, leading to systemic toxic effects involving the heart, lung, kidney, liver, with manifestation of serious heart arrhythmias, intractable shock, acidosis, and pulmonary edema or swelling and fluid in the lungs. After absorption, it is excreted in the urine as hypophosphite, and unfortunately, nobody knows how to do a urine hypophosphite test in animals. There's got to be a lab somewhere that can do it. I tried to find one. Couldn't find one. It causes cellular injury in all the organs of the body. Acute lung injury, cardiotoxicity, acute circulatory failure is well defined. We get liver necrosis or dying of liver tissue, and the same occurs in the kidney. The permissible exposure limit of phosphine is less than 0.3 parts per million. 0.3 parts per million in the working environment, and levels greater than 50 parts per million are dangerous to life, while at 400 to 600 parts per million, it's lethal within half an hour. So we get, let's see, dizziness, easy fatigability, tightness in the chest, headache, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, ataxia, which is wobbliness, numbness, tremors, muscle weakness, jaundice. In severe toxicity, acute respiratory distress syndrome, cardiac failure, cardiac arrhythmias, convulsion, coma, and late manifestation of liver failure and kidney failure. Toxic features usually develop within a few minutes after ingestion. In mild poisoning, nausea, repeated vomiting, diarrhea, headache, abdominal discomfort or pain, and tachycardia, which is a fast heart rate, are common clinical features. These patients will usually show recovery. On the other hand, in moderate to severe ingestional poisoning, the signs and symptoms of the gastrointestinal, cardiovascular, respiratory, and nervous systems appear initially, and later on features of liver and kidney failure and DIC, which is disseminated intravascular coagulation. Basically, all your blood is clotting within your blood vessels. In vet school, we said DIC stood for death is coming, because that's usually what happens. And that can also occur. So this is what we know happens in people. So we know that if our pets were to ingest these fumigants, if they were not off-gassed correctly, we could see same old group of symptoms, correct?
Oh, absolutely. We have FOIA evidence, images of off-gassed fumigants in grain in a pet food manufacturing facility that was getting ready. It's in the bin, ready to go, ready to be processed into pet food. We know the potential is there if a company is not abiding by the safety requirements of these very deadly fumigants. We have FOIA evidence from FDA, OSHA, and Missouri Department of Agriculture, and got all these documents. So we do have evidence that there are companies that do not abide by the required safety measures of this fumigant. And if a pet eats them, it's similar to the pet eating a rat poison, because that's what they're doing. They're eating a rat poison. And it could cause illness.
Right.
You open up a bag. If that bag of pet food has fumigants in it, if it got processed and then went in that extruder, I have no evidence that this happens, but I can visualize that it could easily happen. And it's sealed in there, sealed in that kibble, gone through extrusion. So when you open that bag of airtight kibble, it could be that humans can get sick if they breathe it in as well too, because they're breathing in phosphine gas, and ingesting it is even worse symptoms. The pet would be inhaling it while they're eating, and then it's going to magnify the reaction when it hits that stomach acid.
Exactly. It releases, the aluminum phosphide has an odor. It's described as like garlicky or dead fish.
But it doesn't have to have an odor either. Yeah.
It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to, but it can. This is really interesting because this is an article from Journal of Emergencies, Trauma, and Shock from a NCBI, NIH government thing. And it says aluminum phosphide also poses as a threat for chemical terrorism due to the immediate release of lethal phosphine gas.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Why is this stuff legal?
And why hasn't somebody figured out a better way? Why can't they figure out a safer way?
Why? Well, they can, because for organic, you either have to freeze it or do carbon dioxide. So why wouldn't they do carbon dioxide? I mean, carbon dioxide's got to be cheap, right? Does it take longer? Does it not work as well?
Probably. I don't know. It's probably not as cheap as these fumigants.
I don't know. I
that
feel like
process might take
maybe
longer.
It takes. I don't know. Maybe it's harder to generate enough CO2. I don't know.
But in cold temperatures, this stuff doesn't off gas.
That's the problem.
And if it goes into the pet food factories, these factories are warmer than the outside, granted, but they're not heated. So that fumigant that remained in that grain, remained in that meat meal, then goes into the pet food, and it's stored in a cold warehouse, and then the pet owner brings it into their warm home. There's many, many concerns about this that no one in regulatory is addressing. This is such a serious issue to human and animal health. This is not just pets that they can go, oh, it's just pets. This is human health as well, too. And we have documented human health issues at a pet food manufacturing plant. You would think that regulatory would oversee this a little bit better. To my knowledge, all the information that was shared with them, they've not done anything.
At least OSHA.
Yeah, one person I talked to at OSHA over that Joplin plant, he is who the employees initially reached out to. He was taken off the case right out of the box. And others at OSHA went to the plant and did inspections. I spoke with him a couple of years later. He called me. He found me. I didn't find him. He found me. And he called me late one night. It was like 9:00 at night. And he said, I just want you to know that OSHA failed these people. And I was taken off the case, and I tried to get back involved, and they wouldn't let me. And OSHA failed these people. It's all very suspicious. It's all very suspicious.
Especially after I read the transcript. I mean, there was no, this guy who had zero training and zero protective equipment was opening up these rail cars and these trucks, off-gassing them, but never testing to make sure they were completely off-gassed before they were dumped in the pit. I mean, this is like, reading this transcript to me was like reading a murder mystery, like a whodunit. And it's just like anything that could be done wrong was done wrong. I mean, that guy took the pellet strips and put them in his truck.
Illegal.
And disposed of them in his trash at his house.
Yeah.
No. Like, Where was the training that said, yeah, where's the training that says, hey, you shouldn't be sitting in your truck breathing this stuff in on the way home? And there was no testing to make sure that it was at the safe level. It just blows my mind. And I really feel like that should be part of somebody's responsibility to go into any food plant, whether it's human food or pet feed or livestock feed, anywhere where fumigants are being used, somebody should be going to those plants at least a couple times a year. And I know we have a shortage of everything, but somebody should be going to these plants a couple times a year and saying, let me see your records. Let me see the logs of when the stuff came in, what fumigation it was under, what the reading was when it was off gassed and finished. Let me see the protective gear. Like in that particular lawsuit, in that transcript, the guy said the only time he was ever given a respirator was the day that the inspectors showed up.
And these inspections need to be done on the spot, no advance notice. OSHA needs to go in and go, guess what we're doing today? We're going over your pesticide fumigation records. If your listeners, you're sitting at a railroad crossing waiting for a train to go by, notice on rail cars, they're grain cars, and again, they have those chutes that come out below the belly of the rail car. You'll see a skull and crossbones sign on it. That means that rail car is being transported under fumigation. Now, it is legal for that to happen with rail cars. It's not legal with tractor and trailers, but it's very common. Unfortunately, it's very common.
Yep. So, well, Susan, as usual, a fountain of information. You are amazing. I really appreciate everything that you do. I appreciate that you keep me in the loop. I appreciate our friendship. I'm pretty sure I'm thankful that you invited me to an AFCO meeting a lot of years ago. But
I like for people to join in the misery with me,
And it is misery.
And for your listeners, this woman has gone to the microphone at AFCO meetings many times and given them hell. She has stood up for consumers.
It never works out well for me, though.
She's awesome. Right back at you on the friendship.
They laugh at me. They make fun of me. Man, they're awful.
Yeah.
And it's not just the people.
They're evil people.
It's not just the people who are like the AFCO leaders. It's the people in the audience as well, from big pet food companies who are just god awful. So, all right. Well, thank you very much, Susan. We appreciate all you do, and keep up the good work.
Gonna try. Thank you, Judy.